Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much. I believe this country has a significant problem when it comes to corporate crime, and I believe that the regulators are doing a very poor job at prosecuting people who break our laws, and the government is becoming increasingly complicit in this protection racket that is damaging our economy and damaging the capacity of people to seek redress when wrongs are committed against them. Now, there are a series of things I'd like to walk through in the time I have. And the first is, in the recent budget, the government decided that they would cut the funding available to the Financial Regulatory Assessment Authority, where they decided that they would take money from the FRAA and reduce its capacity to do reviews every 2 years, so it could only do reviews every 5 years. Now, the point of the Financial Regulator Assessment Authority is it is supposed to be ensuring that the regulators are actually doing their job, which is to enforce the law. And we have a major problem in this country where regulators have not been enforcing the law. So cutting funding to that agency, I think, is a peculiar, at best, priority. The second issue, of course, is the PwC matter. And on the weekend, we see that the Treasurer and some other ministers announced, quote-unquote, the biggest crackdown on tax advisor misconduct in Australian history, end quote, and that the government would increase maximum penalties for advisors and firms from 7.8 million to over 780 million. Now, that's all well and good, but a very fine law is no law at all unless it is actually enforced. And again, I think the question on PwC and all these corporate crimes is not one of having laws. It is one of enforcement. And I believe these statements made on the weekend are not going to be effective because I don't believe the government is serious about improving law enforcement. And I make that statement with a lot of confidence because the ASIC inquiry, which we've been running since October, has uncovered a slew of misconduct issues inside the ASIC Commission, but also in relation to cases where an enormous amount of work has been done by the regulator, but then no action is taken in terms of securing civil and criminal penalties. And I can name a bunch of cases, whether it's Nuix or ALS or super fund executives engaging in insider trading, where the evidence is very clear that the law has been broken, but people are not being put into jail and there are not significant penalties being applied. And the government's priority here has been to cover up our capacity to investigate ASIC through the use of public interest immunity claims, which have been made in tandem by the Treasurer, suggested by the Minister Jones, and of course last week here in the Senate, Minister Gallagher made it clear that the government's policy was to support ASIC's position to cover up their case files, to obfuscate and obstruct the Senate, and of course therefore give us no pathway for improving corporate law enforcement in this country. Of course, a regulator under siege wants to do everything in the dark, but our job is to push things into the sunlight because sunlight has shown itself to be the best form of disinfectant. Which takes me to my last point, which is about APRA. Now, the FRAA, I accept it's not a great acronym, but the FRAA found in its review of APRA that APRA had not done enough work and was underdeveloped when it came to its supervision of the superannuation industry, and it needed to do more work on the conversion of unlisted or liquid assets to cash and unlisted asset valuation practices. At estimates in February, I asked APRA about their efforts to ensure that superannuation members are getting accurate valuations, particularly as this is an emerging equity issue between older and younger Australians. APRA took the question on notice and then have responded only recently to say that they undertook a survey of 31 different funds. 26 of those funds were doing quarterly valuations, therefore 5 are only doing annual valuations. So given the market rush we have in Australia on a regular basis, an annual valuation isn't good enough. So in essence, corporate crime in Australia largely goes unpunished and the government is helping cover it up.